Welcome, welcome to Digital Marketing This Week. It's episode 39, A Marketer's Guide to Split Testing. This, of course, is brought to you by Seriously Simple Marketing over at SeriouslySimpleMarketing.com. My name is Chris Mercer. I am an analytics and optimization specialist, so we spend lots of time split testing. So this particular topic is kind of near and dear to my heart. I also do lots of the content development over at Seriously Simple Marketing, and of course, the host of this episode, Digital Marketing This Week. Okay, and yeah, just go ahead and call me Mercer. All right. This week's focus topic is all about split testing. So let's talk about that. But before we dive in, just want to put a reminder out there. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're watching a recording of it, or maybe you're catching us on a podcast and you're not part of our Insiders Club, we actually encourage you obviously to do that. So here's what that is. You go to SSM, right? SeriouslySimpleMarketing.com. And you can actually sign up for this program. It's completely free. We'll actually send you notifications of when DMTWs will actually start happening. And so then you can join us live and you can kind of go into our little virtual studio audience, and then you can ask questions. We have a little insider section after this content. And if you're not a part of that, then obviously you miss all of that. So, but it's a great chance to ask questions and, you know, hang out with everybody and participate in the actual live event itself. And of course, if you can't make the live recording of DMTW, it's still not a problem. As an insider, you have the option of asking questions, even if you're not going to be able to attend live. And that way we can get those answered for you as well. So just a free chance to get some help, and we like providing the service. So there you go. All right, now your goal from this episode is to get one idea. This is with all episodes, of course. One idea, act on that one idea, and then repeat the process. So if you're not split testing at all, just pick something really, really easy, easy for me to say, easy to implement, and then make sure that you implement it, practice it, make it your own, then go back, watch this again, and pull the next thing in. All right, so let's talk about the episode today and why you really should care. First, because today we're going to talk about tools you can use to actually start to split test if you're not already. We're going to talk about how most marketers screw up split tests. And this isn't just a kind of a headline. Most marketers screw up split tests. It's actually been batted around. About 90% of split test quote unquote results are not actually great results at all. So we'll talk about that and how you can avoid being one of the most marketers. And then we'll talk about how to figure out what to split test. In some ways you can do that to help you get started as well. Of course, more than likely you'll pick up a few other things. Okay, so let's talk about a marketer's guide to split testing. Really can't do that without first talking about what is split testing. So we've got a little graphic up here of, you know, two little characters going, one's going one way and one's going the other way, right? That's essentially all that split testing is. It's software that will put up two different options to your visitors. So visitor A sees option 1 and visitor B sees option 2. And that's really what it is. So there are two types of split testing. There are A/B tests and there are what they call multivariate tests, right? So we'll talk about those in a second, but what I want to emphasize here is split testing is not back-to-back tests. And so some people run what they call concurrent testing, which is where you'll come up with a landing page and then you run that from like March to April, right? Then you make some changes and then you run those changes from May to June. Like, you really want to avoid that. That is not a true split test, and you're not really testing. Not really, because the only way to really test is you have to sample the exact same audience at the exact same time, so you get a true representation of who's seeing your site. You know, people that visit your site in March may be completely different. In fact, if you're in the internet marketing space, they most assuredly are completely different than people that are visiting in June or July, right? So June and July, at least in the States, is a big vacation months. Traffic radically changes. If it happens to be around a holiday and you're testing during Christmas and you know, then you test during that holiday period, then you test again in January, you do two back-to-back tests, completely different traffic, right? Completely different traffic. So you're not really going to be able to say, oh, well, my variation, right? My new landing page is much better converting, you know, because it did better, right? You can't do that unless you split test accurately, which again is not back-to-back testing. You want to do them at the same time. So how do we do that? We do that with A/B testing. Now, A/B testing is what most kind of professional optimizers do. We love A/B testing because you do one element at a time. So maybe you're testing a headline, or maybe you're testing an image, or maybe you're testing the VSL copy, right? It might be the VSL style. Maybe you've got a video sales letter, the VSL, a video sales letter, one that's written kind of like a typical sort of PowerPoint slides, and one that has the hand-drawn stuff, right? So it's the exact same script, except how they're presented. So what's good about that is that you can actually see that whatever the one element is that you changed, that was the element that actually had an impact, right? Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but that's important, because if you don't know how you were successful, then you are not successful. Like that's just a fact. You're guessing and you might be right some of the times, and yes, hooray for you, because you might have a little bit more money in your account, but it's really hard to keep duplicating that without just random guessing all the time. So, and that's just tiring. It's much easier to just do one element at a time, understand exactly what changes are having the most impact, and then learning to speak your market's language, which we'll get into in just a second. Now, the other type of test here is multivariate testing. So there's A/B test, which is, again, maybe a headline versus a headline, or there's an image versus a different image, right? Then there's multivariate. Well, that is, there's two different headlines, and there's two different images, and there's two different, maybe VSL styles, right? When we talked about the video sales letters. And you test all of them all at the same time, and you basically tell the software, come up with all the different variations that are possible, right? So maybe you get 9, 10, 15, 20 different variations from all the different possible combinations of the different headline with a different image, with the different VSL style. And the split testing software will do this. The challenge is you don't necessarily know why the page was successful. You can have, you know, a rough idea, but it's not the best way to do that. You don't know if it was successful because of the image, because of the headline, because of the VSL style, right? And so you lose some opportunities to learn. But the big drawback for most people here is just the sheer amount of traffic that it takes. So multivariate testing, even if you have a high traffic site, can take a very long time to get a result, because you're splitting your traffic over so many different pages and so many different things, and it just takes a little while. So that's why most people will spend time, including ourselves, on the A/B side of things. And we just really like to test that one element at a time as opposed to multiple elements at a time with multivariate testing. All right, now we talked about the market's language. So I say that phrase a lot. We talk about it with our clients a lot. So here's what this is like. If you were dropped into sort of like this deserted island, let's not say deserted island, let's say you've dropped into a strange land, right? And these people here that you meet, they do not speak your language at all, right? So you've got to learn how to communicate to them. So you're always like kind of looking at what they're drinking, and you're trying to make out what they're calling it, and then you kind of repeat it and try to think, you know, okay, is that how they said, you know, this was a rock? And they're like, no, it's not it. And you keep trying and trying until finally you go, okay, and you start learning how to say the word rock, right, or whatever it is that they were pointing to. It's just a bunch of guessing. And what you're really doing in that process, right? So you're not just guessing, you're observing, right? You're getting educated guessing in there. So you're observing, going, okay, that's what I think they're calling a rock. So I'm going to try this word and see if it works, and see if it communicates to them. You're learning their language. It's exactly the same thing for your market. Everybody's market is completely different. Your market is completely unique. Even if you have competitors in your market and in your niche, your particular market, because of how you market to them, is completely unique. So you've got to learn how to understand that market. Now, they may have some similarities, right? So like if you know Spanish, you might be able to pick up some Italian because they're kind of similar, that sort of thing, but they're still distinctly unique languages. So when you go to split test, right, that's the tool, that's the kind of the observation that we use to look and see, okay, how do I say rock? And you split test and you say, is this how you say rock, right? Is this, I think you're going to be into a more, let's say a benefit driven headline, right? Or maybe a more curiosity driven headline. And maybe even something as such like, let's choose an easy one, like a counter, right? I think a counter is going to put some scarcity play in there, like time is running out, and you as a market will respond to that. So you test that, and you have a page with a counter, you have a page without a counter, and then the market will respond, yes or no, right? There's either going to be more sales or there's not. And then you know, okay, great. So scarcity is something that works. Like this counter does work. I'm understanding them, right? I understand how to get action from the marketplace. And that's all that split testing is asking over and over and over again. How about now? How about now? How about now? Right? And that's how you learn the market's language. All right, so let's talk about one huge component. And this, you know, we talked about how most marketers screw up split tests, and this is definitely one of those things where you could put this under. It's not the main thing I want to talk about under that, but this is definitely one, because it's one that most people skip, and it's the hypotheses. Your job is not to go to your competitors and, you know, see what they're doing and copy what they're doing, because most of the competitors haven't really effectively tested anything. Again, 90% of tests that are out there tend to be off, right? When you look at their results, they're really not any good. They're just practically guessing, and they, you know, saw something light up on a testing software that said it was a good test, and they're like, okay, fine, that must be the winner. But when you really look at the numbers, it's not. And again, we'll talk about that in just a second. But they don't have necessarily hypotheses behind any of these tests. They're just guessing at different stuff. And so your job is to sit there and say, okay, I need to figure out why I'm testing this, right? So what's the theory behind, what am I trying to learn? And if you're not able to learn anything from a test, right? I mean, obviously the test is that symptom, that secondary result is you want to bump, right? You want to get a bump in the revenue or a bump in opt-ins or whatever it is, the result that you're trying to track through. but there should be a theory behind that. Why is this test going to work? We talked about that counter earlier, right? Maybe doing a little countdown timer. And with that countdown, why would that countdown timer work? Well, if it works, it's going to work because it's scarcity, right? Let's say it's that. But you might also find that it doesn't work, right? So they could have completely tanked. That test could have completely tanked. In which case, you look at the page, you see how people were reacting to it, and maybe you decide, wow, I just learned that having distracting elements on the page is a problem. Like these people were really fast, or they're mostly on mobile, and the thing wasn't loading, or whatever. There's lots of different things, but the hypothesis is where it all starts. What are you trying to learn? So here's an example. So they talk about buttons a lot, right? Everyone says, oh, orange buttons, right? Belcher buttons, whatever. So you have the idea here would be behind a button, a hypothesis. And again, this is something you think through, is that, okay, if you have a higher contrast button, right? Orange is not always the best color, especially if your site is about Halloween, because it's probably orange and black. Those orange buttons are going to blend right in. So you need something different, right? That's where you say, okay, a higher contrast button color, right? It's going to make my desired CTA, the call to action, easier to notice and lead to like a 5% revenue improvement, right? Something along those lines. So here's what my thing is that I'm testing. Here's the item that I'm testing. Here's what I expect to happen as a result, right? That is your hypothesis. And then you test. You don't know if you're right or not. Most of the time, you're going to be wrong. That's just sort of the nature of the beast here. But the times that you're right, again, you get to keep those learnings. Actually, even the times that you're wrong, you get to keep those learnings, which is actually kind of a benefit, because even if you learn what doesn't work, you're still making progress when you're learning to speak the market's language. Now let's talk about the results. This is the part that most marketers screw up. So we kind of use a red light, yellow light, green light system. We'll kind of go over the general idea of that here. So a red light would be if your test is not run for at least one complete sales cycle. Now, for most people out there, if you have like digital products that you're selling, somebody comes to a funnel and they can purchase right there, all that sort of stuff, your sales cycle is roughly about 7 days, right? So, and we say it's 7 days because Monday traffic is very different than Saturday afternoon traffic, which is very different than Sunday morning traffic, which is different than Wednesday afternoon traffic, right? All of these days have different traffic patterns. Now, if you have less than that 7 day period of time, you just don't have enough of the people coming through your funnel to be able to effectively say, yes, this variation will win every single time. Because if you haven't tested, for example, weekends, right? If you haven't had a chance to have at least one weekend go through your funnel, that weekend type traffic, you don't know that weekend type traffic would actually convert on that. It may not, because it's a very different mindset when you're browsing on the weekend versus at work when the boss is staring down your neck. All right. The next thing is 100 conversions per variation, right? So in this case, it'd be a red light because we would have a less than. So if you have less than 100 conversions per variation, meaning if you have an A/B test going up, maybe you're just doing 2 different pages, right? You've got the control and you've got the variation. So of those, you need to have roughly 100 conversions per, right? That doesn't mean 100 people saw it. That means 100 people converted. They actually took the action you're looking for. So best case scenario, right? That's that you're looking for, at least 100. If you have less than 100, you just don't have enough data again, right? I've seen lots of tests that were called where test A had 14 people convert on it and test B had 10 people convert on it. And they would say, variation would have maybe 10 people convert. And they would say, oh, well, it's 40% improvement. Right? Well, you have no idea. Not with that many people. There's only 24 people that went through the whole thing. There's no way you can say that's a 40%, even if it took a week to do that. You just cannot do it. It's not enough data. So you need lots of data, right, for a good split test. And this goes back down to, again, helping you make sure you do that. So if you have less than one sales cycle or you have less than 100 conversions per variation, you really can't make a decision. And then you've got the confidence level. Now, these are the tools that are the bane to a professional optimizer's life. So they are useful, but the problem is a lot of these tools will just sort of like send up alerts, or, like VWO puts little trophies, and Optimizely declares winners when they, hit 95%. And you really cannot say it's a winner just off the confidence level. All that says is based on the current data that I have, and it doesn't say that it's enough data. So these tools are, at least not yet, they're not yet smart enough to know what enough data is, but they can say based on the information I have, right, this might be a 95% confidence rating. But if you don't have 100 conversions, you don't have at least 1 day's or 1 week's worth of traffic, right, one sales cycle, then you can't actually make that decision. So, and then certainly if you're less than 95% confident with all this other stuff, then you definitely can't pull the trigger on that. So that's kind of the red light scenario. Now, if you wanted to do the yellow light scenario, okay, I'm gonna pop these up here. You've 1 to 3 sales cycles. So if you've got at least a week to 3 weeks, again, using that mostly instantaneous purchasing type cycle. If your cycle is longer, then you would just expand that out. But let's say, you've got 1 to 3 weeks worth of good data, right? and you've got between 100 and 300 conversions set, right? It's not perfect, but it's good. It's much better than what you've had before. And then let's say that your confidence rating is 80 to 95%. Okay, this is cautionary. If you absolutely had to, you could make some sort of decision here to move forward. But it would be cautionary. I would much rather see something where at least the confidence rating was at 95% before it was a total green light. And that's kind of what we're looking for there. So let's talk about the green light. The green light would be at least 3 sales cycles, at least 300 conversions per variation, and a 95% confidence rating. Now, how likely is that? It hardly ever happens. It does happen on occasion, but it hardly ever happens, just being honest. What you end up doing is you have at least a 95 confidence rating. That's one that we never budge on, right? That's the one you absolutely want to have done. If you're going to call a test and say this variation is having an impact, you have to have that confidence rating at least 95%. But if the page just isn't getting a ton of traffic and we only have 150 conversions, right, or 100 conversions, then maybe we got to pull the trigger. We will always also do our best to make sure we have at least 1 sales cycle. Doesn't always make it to 3, but at least we get 1 or 2 under our belt, then we're good too. So technically, the sales cycles and that little conversions component might be technically yellow lights, but if we get that 95% confidence rating, we will still kind of move forward with it, depending upon the situation. But if we have the opportunity, what you're looking at, what we want to see is that green light scenario, which is, again, 3 or more sales cycles, you've got 300 conversions per variation, you've got 95% confidence rating. That's when you can say, okay, this test result that I'm getting, this is a good test. This is not just quirky traffic that happened to come through because of some weird news event and everybody bought my product that day and it skewed the results. It's not because of noise in the internet traffic. It's the data is actually saying chances are, right, 95% chance, that's what these confidence ratings mean. It's a 95% chance that the changes that you made on this variation are the changes that are actually having an impact, right? These are actually having an impact. And so that's what's so important about these. And it's, again, this is where I cannot emphasize enough. Most marketers screw up. There are lots of marketers that quote lots of test results, quote unquote test results that they've done that are not real results. They're at their very best guesses, right? And so it's stuff like that you just have to be hyper aware of if you're going to play follow the leader. Now you can follow other people for ideas, right? We do that all the time. We like seeing what other people are doing and kind of getting creative ideas, but just because one person's doing it does not mean it works. So you have to test everything, right? And so we didn't kind of create a little section for this, but just as an aside, test everything. If somebody says to you, even if it's somebody that you respect, even if it's us, and you say, hey, we say, hey, you know what? We tested this and this works really well. Maybe PowerPoints that zoom in the text or something like that, right? And or kinetic text, which is the text that kind of moves around on the screen. Maybe we test that, it does incredibly well, and we say, hey, we just tested this, it did really well. You should test it for your market because your market may not like it, right? You don't just do it because we did it. You don't do anything because somebody else told you to do it. Even as something as standard as like the Belcher button, right? Which are these yellow buttons with the kind of the red dash lines around them and stuff. Like, can they outperform other buttons? Sure, but you should test them because they may not outperform those, right? They could actually hurt you sometimes. And so that's why you test everything. All right, so let's continue. What to test? How do we know what we should test? Well, number one, you measure everything. Now, we did not talk about analytics, but you would do that, right? So you measure everything, and this is where you would set up your Google Analytics. You want to set up quantitative and qualitative, right? So that's everything. That's analytics, that's heat maps, that's user surveys. We use tools like Google Analytics to do that, and we set up everything. We'll put everything through Google Tag Manager and make sure we're measuring everything on the site, every single possible click that people are taking on our site. We want measured and reported back to us so we can get an idea of how the market is using the page, right? Heat map, same way. We can get an idea of where they're clicking on the page, and we might find out that they're clicking on a bunch of different images thinking because it looked like a button to them, right? Or they thought they wanted more information around it. And so it's things like that where you're like, wow, okay, I didn't realize we have a lot of errant clicks. We need to get rid of those, right? You need to either change the look of it or make it clickable, things like that. You'll learn with heat maps. The user surveys, you can use tools. So heat maps, we use like tools like Crazy Egg. You can also use tools like Hotjar, which actually is recently out of beta. So Hotjar is good for like user surveys, actually does some heat mapping and stuff too. But with Hotjar, you can actually pop up a little feedback survey. It says, hey, just wanted to see, how you're getting along on this, right? So you can maybe get some information from those surveys. You can even do whether they're open-ended or multiple choice. I mean, you can get user feedback and get an idea of, again, how the market is using the page. Then, based on all of that, That's what you look at and say, okay, what do we need to test? You take all of your data. So let's say you're measuring everything and you find out that you have a 2% conversion rate from your VSL. Let's say we're doing a video sales letter. So you have a 2% of the people that see your VSL go to your cart. Okay. So that may not be bad if you're doing cold traffic. So that's probably okay. And so then you go into your cart page and you find that 90% of your people are not converting on your cart. That's the page that you're going to want to test, right? So that's an error. That's a sign right there. And so that's when you're running heat maps on everything. So you can see, oh, wait a second. So maybe I don't have anything about SSL security. You can see as people are coming down to your cart that they sort of fill out a bunch of fields, but they're not filling out maybe the credit card information, right? Or they're having a problem. Maybe they're clicking on a certain icon thinking they're selecting Visa, but it's just a Visa icon there, and they can't figure out how to put in their credit card information. You see all sorts of stuff that will constantly surprise you, because you'll sit there going like, wow, I cannot believe they can't figure this out. It's so simple. But it's simple for you. You might have seen this thing a million times, right? You've always gone with the intention of buying something. It's your funnel. This is your baby. You're not going to look at it the same way. The market looks at it completely differently. And when they're going through your funnel, they're going to look for anything that's kind of sketchy or off-putting, and they're going to leave. And so if you have some sort of abandonment rate like that on a cart, that's where you put all these different tools on, right? Asking questions, maybe putting live chat, trying to do anything you can to figure out what it is that's bugging them about this card. Maybe they couldn't find, they had to go back to your sales page because they were trying to find information about a guarantee, right? Because they were feeling like it may be a little bit of a risky decision and you don't have any information about your guarantee on the page. So you could do stuff like that, right? So these are the things that you'll learn, and those things will tell you what to test. So at the end of the day, it comes down to asking the market. That's a very important concept for this. It's not your job to dictate to the market. If you dictate to the market, they're going to slap you silly and put you back, right? So you can never dictate to the market. What you can do is you can ask the market. You could ask the market and say, okay, how are you using this page? What are you exactly trying to do, right? And how can I make it easier? And the how can I make it easier is you sort of thinking about that and then saying, okay, well, here's this variation I came up with to make it easier. Maybe going back to our card example, we added some security symbols that to make it they understand that their transaction is secure. Maybe we added the guarantee, and maybe we're testing the guarantee, just to make sure that the guarantee statement was bold enough where they noticed that, so that it helped bolster right around that period. And so you could test that, and that's how you know, okay, is this what you want? Like, is this what you're looking for? Were you afraid of risk? And so we're helping you to minimize the risk by repeating our 30-day guarantee about how good it is, right? Or maybe adding some pictures of testimonials. So there's lots of different things you can do. That's why you test and you ask the market. They will tell you yes or no. If the 30-day guarantee, repeat little badge doesn't work, try testimonials that talk about it, right? And then maybe that will work for them. But that's why you're constantly asking the market. You'll see there's a pattern here. Now, if you are looking for some split testing tools, there are some that we recommend. We actually use VWO for everything that we do with Seriously Simple Marketing. And actually just about all of our clients also use VWO. So it's way into the 90 percentile, I'd say, use VWO for the people that we work with. There are some that use Optimizely. So Optimizely is also out there. And then Google Analytics. Now, Google Analytics has a free split testing section, let's call it. It's in the Google experiment section, or in the experiment section, they call it, in analytics. And it's free to set up, and it's not horrible. If you are just starting out, you could try it. I personally would recommend just using something like VWO. They're really expensive or inexpensive. They cost like, what, $9 a month, I think, for a tiny plan. So if you're low traffic, you just want to start out something like that, they may even have free trials now. So check it out, because VWO, again, it's really good. It keeps it easy. You can use their editor, which is also important. Optimizely also has an editor where basically you load up the page and then you can change the headline out on your own without having to create an entirely new page, right? The split testing software is helping you do that for you. So there's lots of benefits to that. All right. At the end of the day, split testing is the only way to learn your market's language. You're not going to find a better way to communicate with your market unless you are constantly split testing. So be sure that if this is at all interesting to you at all, be sure that you start to split test something, because you will learn things. And the more that you learn, again, you take that learning with you, and this next split test get even better and better and better. Okay, so what was your one idea? Was the idea of the hypothesis and making sure that you have a hypothesis for every test? Was it what makes a great split test, and actually judging the results, knowing when to call a split test, right? Knowing when it actually is a real result versus just sort of like a convenient result that may or may not be true. And then how do you know what to split test? Maybe that was it, right? You're thinking about, okay, well, yeah, I have testing software, but I'm just always out of ideas. I'm not sure what to do. right? So measure things, and especially around the heat maps, user surveys, and obviously analytics, they will tell you the market, right? The feedback the market's giving you there, it will tell you what you should split test. At the end of the day, whatever it is, remember, action brings results. So if you aren't doing hypotheses, make sure that you do that. That's a good first step. Make sure you have a hypothesis and it's well thought out and you've kind of gotten an idea of what it is that you're looking for. If you haven't yet haven't set up heat maps or something like that to get data, right? Maybe you just have analytics, but you don't have heat maps, things like that, then set up something like Crazy Egg. Set up a free trial with them. So there's lots of cool things you can do. Again, action is what brings results. So with that, we're going to go ahead and finish out our content portion, and then we'll shut it down and move over to the insiders section of our show. If you are not joining us for that, and it's probably just because you're watching us on pre-recorded, whether YouTube or the podcast, just go to seriouslysimplemarketing.com. You can get your free invitation, again, completely free service, and we look forward to seeing you on a future episode of Digital Marketing This Week. This has been episode 39, A Marketer's Guide to Split Testing.